Hello and welcome to Channel 51 News for Friday, the 19th of September. And what a week it's been, what a month it's been. After we had a hot August and everyone's hoping for a fabulous October, September has delivered us many surprises as the world is starting to pay attention to the shot heard around the world. And suddenly, the left, well, they don't like the idea of free speech being challenged. How about that? And that's the Jimmy Kimmel story we'll get into a bit later. But as this is an Australian show and the audience is asking for Australian news, we'll get into that as well. And look, I hope that you enjoyed my interview with Craig Kelly yesterday for the 51st State and Channel 51, and you can catch that at channel51.com.au. I noticed a lot of people catching it there. It's also being shared, as all my content now is, on the Cafe Locked-Out Network. So you can catch it on John Larder's page on Facebook, Michael Gray Griffith interviews, and some other pages as well, including on X, Paul Easterhouse's page, and of course there are others as well. Courage is the Cure with Robin. So what I want to talk to you about today is, firstly, Sussan Ley is under immense pressure in the Liberal Party. Part of that came up in the conversation yesterday with Craig Kelly. But this week she came out with this stunning statement about the entitlement to welfare. So this was then taken up on Sky News with Chris Kenny, who got the fabulous Gigi to come in and comment. So I'm going to play you this contained clip now. It'll basically deliver the narrative, and we'll talk about it when we come back. Take a look.
Unfortunately, in the past few years, the pendulum has swung too far towards dependency. It's become almost taboo in politics to suggest that not everyone is entitled to a government benefit.
Yeah, it's all true enough, but easier said than done. I asked the University of New South Wales economics professor Gigi Foster what she made of Lee's speech.
I mean, I think she's definitely right. I mean, she could go a lot further, but this is also a bit of too little, too late, in the sense that we now, in 2025, face such a monstrosity of sclerotic bureaucracy, unresponsive to the people's needs, that it's really going to take a lot to untangle that. In fact, I wrote something, I think 3 years ago, entitled The New Gordian Knots, because that's what it feels like. It feels like it's a Gordian knot of intertwined, interdependent government control, regulation, and as she correctly notes, an attitude by the population that promotes that kind of dependency on government. And this is one of the reasons why I've been doing a lot of what I've been doing the last few years, including founding Australians for Science and Freedom, having a lot of community engagement. I'm trying to get people to recognize they need to be the stewards of their way of life, and we need to be the overseers on those in power.
Yeah, spot on. Look, this is core Liberal Party philosophy, though. There's no detail in this from Sussan Ley, but the Liberal Party is supposed to be about small government and self-reliance and choice. Now, it's drifted away from that over recent years, I suppose, but she's just really outlined what should be the core tenet of Liberal policy, yet there's no detail. We hardly ever hear from the Shadow Treasurer, Ted O'Brien, and there was no plans. There was no outline in the speech today about where they would cut spending.
Well, that's very true, but you have to understand the politics here, right? The reason for that lack of detail is because if she were to propose anything specific, a huge number of vested interests would cry foul. So This is the problem with the Gordian knot issue that we face. It's just there are too many people with their snouts in the trough. And so if you propose anything specific, it looks like you're taking things away, and people don't want to have their current situation disturbed, particularly those who are benefiting from the government purse and the handouts. So this is a real problem. And you see in the United States the type of radicalism, in a sense, that is needed to try to break through some of the strangulation that has developed over the last 20 or 30 years. And even there, I think a lot of the attempts that are being made are not going to go as far as the people would like them to go, or as it would be good for the people, because there's just so much dependency and so much intertwining of vested interests with.
What we're now learning is what's really happening behind the scenes in the Liberal Party. Sussan Ley comes out and goes after welfare in a very general idea, effectively dipping her toe in the water to see what kind of reaction she'll get from Conservative supporters, because for her to win government, she's going to have to pull the vote from the third parties. She's going to struggle to pull voters from disaffected Labor voters, but that's obviously where she's headed because she's on the left wing, if you have one, in the Liberal Party. She's a lefty. And in many cases, you could argue she's a DEI type of candidate in the first instance, and she said we have to get to net zero as soon as possible. So she's being shoved from pillar to post within the party to shore up support at a time when, if you watched the video yesterday with Craig Kelly, the interview, you'll see his 10-point plan to save Australia, which means that Andrew Hastie must quit the party, take 5 or 6 with him, and set up a whole new party and incorporate the third parties as well, or the Senate parties. So she knows that she's under a whole lot of stress and change is coming one way or another. And it's coming from the middle. And as I talked about with Craig, you can't just go down the pathway of pushing to the left and going to the centre because you end up having to go more left, which is what she's doing. And you can't beat the lefties at being lefties if you're not a lefty, if that makes sense to you. All right, let's move on and also cover this off just for more balance and perspective. This was obviously what we saw this week when Senator Jacinta Price was demoted for her comments from a Labor Party analyst that said that 85% of Indian immigrants vote Labor. And that was considered to be not a nice thing to say. So that's why Sussan Ley has got to make changes, because she's sacking the stars of her party. She's not the star. Jacinta Price is the star. Jacinta Price did more for the Liberal Party and the National Party than anyone in the way that she defeated the Voice. Interesting, isn't it? So this is what happens. All right, let's now move on, because the subject goes over to climate change. And you're going to hear from Jim Chalmers, who is not very charming at all, because now he's not just calling us the cookers and the crackpots. He's calling anyone, including the Liberal Party, who is doubting net zero. Now, let me ask you this question. If the Treasurer of the country, the world's most senior person involved with economics, or for all of us, is calling his opponents names over something that he insists is settled science, or is it? Why would he resort to that? And if it really were that bad, you wouldn't need to do anything except to say, like in any crisis, when Australians all come out and help their neighbours in a flood, you just come out and fix it. But let's take a look at this clip. We'll come back and talk.
One of the areas where government has expanded exponentially is in climate and energy policy. Lots of funds, lots of specific grants, lots of subsidies, lots of tax breaks. And the government today announced another $1 billion fund for so-called low-carbon fuels. The Treasurer was at this announcement. Here's what he had to say.
The worst possible outcome from an economic point of view and an environmental point of view would be if we walked away from net zero, as our political opponents want us to do. Now, the Liberal Party is run now by this weird collection of cookers and crackpots, and nowhere is that more obvious than when it comes to net zero.
Isn't it the pursuit of net zero that flies in the face of science and economics?
Yes. I mean, this is classic. We have seen this throughout the COVID period as well. The projection is jaw-dropping. Who are the crackpots? The people who are saying we must pursue net zero at all costs. That is a fanatical, dogmatic statement. That is not an economic statement, Mr. Chalmers. And unfortunately, I see the same pattern here as I saw during the COVID era, which is that there's an output from a statistical model in somebody's computer somewhere that hasn't been proven, hasn't been tested in reality. And by the way, these climate catastrophists' predictions from 20, 30, 40 years ago have not come to fruition. So I'm not sure why we would now believe these predictions. And then based on that, simple so-called science, which it is not, but just a model, all sorts of sacrifices are proposed, so supposedly in order to get us into avoiding horrible damage, but there's no cost-benefit analysis, and there's certainly no even recognition of the costs of those sacrifices. And so I just find this completely uneconomic. It's the opposite of what Jim Chalmers is saying. It's anti-scientific. And honestly, if the government really believed its projections, it wouldn't be investing in this net zero stuff with the subsidies for companies. It would be trying to protect the people of Australia from these rising sea levels.
Exactly.
It'd be doing other kinds of investment. And we never hear anything about that. So that tells me either they don't believe their own nonsense, or they're just too lazy to try to work around all the vested interests who are benefiting from these subsidies.
Just briefly then to finish, give me your logical razor over the phrase that the cost of inaction will always be higher than the cost of any action.
Unbelievable. When has that ever been true? You always in economics must compare the cost of whatever option you're considering, including doing nothing, to the benefit that you're getting. And you only keep on the table those alternatives, including doing nothing, that actually give you a positive net benefit. And I've seen no estimates of a positive net benefit from this net zero madness.
Well, Professor Gigi Foster is a real breath of fresh air. I had the delight to be able to interview her at TNT. And perhaps we'll locate that interview as well and upload it to the Substack page, which is found at qcitizen.net or channel51.com.au in the future. Now, I just want to show you a couple of points here. This is from the interview yesterday with Craig Kelly. This is annual CO2 emissions comparing Australia to China from Our World in Data, going all the way back to 1898, where Australia was virtually zero, and today is well below 1 billion tonnes, well below 500 million tonnes, and China at 12 billion tonnes. One is virtually horizontal, and the other is virtually vertical. Thanks, Chris Bowen. So why are all our politicians lefties in China, and why is Mike Carlton and pirate Peter Fitzsimons celebrating this and accusing anyone of asking questions by saying, well, Tony Abbott was there too? Well, Daniel Andrews isn't in office. He's a private citizen. So what was he doing in China? But how can you go to China and piss in their pockets, pardon the French, and at the same time come back and peddle this climate nonsense that's only making it more expensive in this transition period that's failing? And yet China is producing more coal-powered stations, etc., as we all know. But here's the point. For every dollar we spend in this pursuit that's costing us more, China is working against it at 32 times. Posted this on X overnight. No matter if you believe in climate change or not, no matter how much we spend to get taxed or pay overs for alternate energy sources, any work we do to reduce carbon dioxide, whether you believe that or not, is undone by Labor's overlord, China, by 32 times. And Jim Chalmers calls dissenters, including his political opponents, cookers and crackpots. As Australia's most senior manager, he is the cooker and crackpot. Quoting their Bertrand Russell, the whole problem with the world is that fools and fanatics are always so certain of themselves, and wiser people so full of doubts. Interesting, isn't it? And that applies to us as well. I tell you what, as we take this moment just to reflect on what we've been through, and the Charlie Kirk story just keeps going. And this is another one, isn't it? Because we're told an official narrative and there are 3 alternate narratives that are forming. We'll touch on that a little bit later. In the meantime, some of the predictions: 1960s overpopulation, mass starvation; 1970s deforestation, the new ice age, and oil is gone in 10 years. The 1980s, acid rain, all crops and forests destroyed, no clean water. The 90s, the ozone layer gone in 10 years, skin cancer pandemic. 2000s, global warming, ice caps gone in 10 years, worldwide floods. 2010s, global warming, become climate change, only 12 years to live. Not happened, but all of them resulted in more taxes. It's a bit accurate, isn't it? In the meantime, let's play, for balance, once again, a clip here from Ian Plimer talking with Senator Alex Antic about climate science that Gigi debunked with the idea that modelling is not science. Let's get Ian Plimer's point of view.
Now, in terms of the 97%, this is misleading and deceptive. There was a sociologist who did a survey of about 10,000 climate scientists. Now, I question the word scientist because these are people who are eminently unemployable, except if they're working in a climate institute or a university or CSIRO or something. And he put a survey out to 10,000. 3,000 of them deemed to answer it. And he then chose 77 of the replies. And out of those 77, 76 said, yes, we humans are destroying the planet and cooking it up. one said no. And that's how you got the 97.1% figure.
And this was tweeted by Barack Obama.
Yes, and there is a lot in the literature, especially by a chap called David Legatis, who's a mathematician, who's just torn this apart. But you never hear that. You only hear that 97% figure. Now, I like that 97% figure because I would argue that 97% of scientists will agree with those who pay them.
Where have we heard that before? From Professor Ian Plimer, indeed. 97% very selective use of statistics. Lies, damn lies and statistics. Well, I also had the luxury and privilege of being able to interview Ian Plimer back in the TNT days. I'm going to play for you now an excerpt from that interview. Take a look. For a day, for example. Ian, have you thought about what policies you would put in place? Let's say that the policies that you put in place are the ones that we stick with for the next 25 years. What, for example, would you cut and what, for example, would you introduce?
Well, my policies would be called common sense policies. And the common sense policies are that we live in a society where people have an expectation of eventually owning their own house. That becomes very difficult with the number of immigrants coming into this country. In the US, there's a huge number of illegal immigrants, anything between 7 and 9 million have crossed that border. So I think we've got to look at immigration and the effect on the economy. Yes, the GDP does increase, but the individual wealth decreases. That would, I think, solve many problems. That is unemployment. That is those people who maybe should consider going to university. Maybe they won't. Maybe they'll do a trade. So immigration would be one of them. I would strengthen the defence system, and we need a strong defence system such that no one attacks us. We've got a very weak defence system. I would basically start again with the education system and go back to what we did in the 19th century with the Newman ideas on education. I would have an economy where entrepreneurs are rewarded for taking risks, maybe going broke, picking himself up again, starting again. Instead, we tax them. Australia is the highest taxing country in the world now. And how do you think we can be a clever country if we tax people so much? I would be very kind to our bureaucrats in that capital city called Canberra, and I would give them a taste of the country. So the people in infrastructure, I would move to Rabbit Flat, the Northern Territory. Why? Because there's no infrastructure. I would move Department of Aboriginal Affairs to an Aboriginal area such as Halls Creek or in Western Australia. I would move the Department of Climate if they existed, but I'd shift them down to a pleasant place like Queenstown and Tasmania, put the Department of Agriculture out in Western Queensland, maybe St George's. Department of Trade, you'd put them at, say, Gladstone, where we have a huge amount of export. The Department of Finance would put them at Port Hedland, where we export 500 million tonnes of iron ore a year. I would decentralise these people from their little bubble, and I'd put them in a situation whereby they have to eyeball people every day that their decisions affect. Now, of course, they are so precious that many of them wouldn't move to areas where other Australians live. Well, that's fine. You've then reduced the number of people in the civil service. I would also like to see you kill off 5 pieces of legislation for every new one you bring in. So I think if I was king for a day, I would try to use words that are not used in bureaucracies any longer. Bureaucracies have the ability to raise taxes, but they never cut costs. I'd be looking at cutting costs.
What a job that was, working at TNT and interviewing people of the calibre of Ian Plimer and Gigi Foster every week. Wow. Gosh, great memories. Well, a couple of points to bring up there. One was for every new law to cut 5. An interesting idea or concept, quite simple, is for every rule made creates a rule breaker. Doesn't it? Naturally. More rules are broken. Less rules are broken. Go figure. Now, he also talked about the idea of home ownership. Now, for some, this is controversial. For others, it's an escape. And for me, it's what it has always been about. Finding my smile, my family's smile, and living my best life, doing things differently, and escaping the rat race. I'm going to play for you now a promo just because I can. How about that, huh? BaliFreeReport.com, or you can email me at jasonqcitizen@gmail.com and answer some of those questions and get the latest price list to you if you're interested. Fully managed, fully furnished, affordable, great rent returns. There's a lot you have to learn in all of that in terms of setting up different financial instruments overseas, etc. And so you've got to educate yourself or get advice from the appropriate people to do that, of which I'm not, but can certainly share information if that is your cup of tea. And if it's not, let's not. I hope you find what you're looking for. Let's now move to the next part of the story here. This has just been pointed to me a little while ago. Today, the Biometrics Institute, if you didn't know there was one, there is, posted this. The Biometrics Institute recently attended the prestigious Identity Verification Services Forum in Sydney, Australia, and we'd like to extend our thanks to the Attorney General for the invitation to participate in these important discussions. During the event, we presented our insights on the future directions for biometrics and were thrilled to be the first external organisation to receive a hard copy of the new National Identity Proving Guidelines issued by the Australian AG's Department. At a time when digital identity is becoming more critical, these guidelines represent a vital step forward. You can find out more and download a copy of the document directly from the Attorney General's Department website. The Institute also addressed the rapidly evolving landscape of biometrics, focusing on its future challenges and what lies ahead. We underscored the importance of responsible implementations, highlighting the 3 laws of biometrics as a foundational principle for building secure and trustworthy systems. More information on the Biometrics Institute, good practice resources, also available at our website. Ouch. So what I did was I went on that link to the Attorney General's page. This is what you will see when you see it. And I then had a look at the information. I'm going to zoom in for you now. The National Identity Proofing Guidelines 2025 provide broad best practice guidance for identity proofing, establishing a person is who they say they are. The guidelines align where possible with digital ID accreditation rules to increase consistency in identity proofing for both physical and digital ID. They strengthen identity proofing practices and increase trust through a standardized, transparent national principles and risk-based approach. Here's the important part. The guidelines are voluntary. Compliance is encouraged but not mandatory. So that's the Labor government's Attorney General. Encouraged but not mandatory. Say it again and keep saying it, because it's going to be encouraged, which means that you are going to be enticed to go in a different format. Encouraged, guidance, guidelines are voluntary, compliance is encouraged but not mandatory. Good. All right. Now, I've said this forever. Whenever the government wants you to do something you don't want to do, there's always 2 reasons why. 1, convenience, and the other one, safety. So let's look at the next paragraph and see how many safeties and conveniences we can find in there. Here we go. So public and private sector organisations should apply the recommended identity proofing practices in line with their circumstances and specific risk profile. The guidelines enable a greater range of identity verification processes to be conducted online, supporting systems such as the National Identity Verification Services. These systems increase the confidence that organisations have in their validity of an identity document and reduces the need to keep copies of individuals' identity documents. Well, that's convenience. This results in significant cost savings, more convenience, promotes privacy. Don't know how that works, but more convenience, lessens the impact of data breaches. I don't know how that happens, but that's safety, and maintains strong controls against identity fraud. Safety. So we've got 3 safeties and 3 conveniences right there. That's all it's ever about, safety and convenience. And you know, with all the hacks that have been going on, and they'll tell you that there aren't any until there are, you know that that doesn't make any sense. So putting all your eggs in one basket was never a sound economic strategy, nor should it be a sound anything strategy. Diversification. Don't they say diversity, equity, and inclusion when it comes to people? And that's because it was based on every economic advice anyone ever got was diversify your investment. Now they're telling you to centralize for your safety. It's unbelievable, isn't it? All right, let's now check out the next story here as we move out of biometrics. And now we're going to go to Jimmy Kimmel. So we've all heard the story that Kimmel has been suspended for his comments about Charlie Kirk and the alleged assassin being MAGA, which clearly he wasn't. And that's probably led down the pathway because that would be misinformation and, of course, another form of intellectual bullying, perhaps even another form of incitement against the people who support the president of America. But what I want to do now is play for you this clip, because Kimmel was taken out and was stood down over his comments about Charlie Kirk and the assassin alleged. Here he is 4 years ago during COVID. And as soon as you see it, you will remember. Take a look.
Dr. Fauci said that if hospitals get any more overcrowded, they're going to have to make some very tough choices about who gets an ICU bed. That choice doesn't seem so tough to me. Vaccinated person having a heart attack? Yes, come right on in. We'll take care of you. Unvaccinated guy who gobbled horse goo? Rest in peace, Wheezy.
Dr. Fauci. That's who we're all believing in. Fauci. Remember him? Well, I thought it was interesting that this study popped up September 9. We covered it, the Henry Ford vax versus unvax study. Now, there's a lot of stuff going on about that, videos around social media, and they're staggering because what they're saying is that study needs to be out there in the main straight away because it's obvious that the damage caused to those kids who have been given preventative medicines versus those that haven't are clear, glaring, and obvious. Dr. Fauci. So we know that we've been hoodwinked, and maybe, just maybe, that Kimmel has paid a price for something else, old Al Capone style. Well, from that video, I'm going to now show you, because it was played on CNN, this was the presenter and the discussion that followed straight after.
Andy, I know he's making a joke, but what do you think about that? The idea that, the unvaccinated at this point are making a personal choice. And so why are precious hospital and ICU resources going to them over other gravely ill people in some cases?
Well, look, I'm someone who believes that healthcare is a right in this country and that you can make bad decisions. You can smoke cigarettes. You can choose not to get vaccinated. You can do all sorts of things. But someone's version of what is good or bad, even if we all might disagree with those decisions, shouldn't get in the way of someone getting access to healthcare in this country. Too often it does.
So it's a fair response when the setup there was to say, well, you don't deserve it. What do you do with the smokers and the drinkers and the drug addicts? They're all supposed to get a free go. But if you don't take the certain needle, well, you're a bad person. Well, it reminded me of this scene from a very old film over 50 years ago, and you might not like the actor, but the scene certainly is apt. Sleeper, 1973.
Well, he's fully recovered, except for a few minor kinks.
Has he asked for anything special?
Yes, this morning for breakfast, he requested something called wheat germ, organic honey, and tiger's milk.
Oh, yes, those are the charmed substances that some years ago were felt to contain life-preserving properties.
You mean there was no deep fat? No steak or cream pies or hot fudge?
Those were thought to be unhealthy. Precisely the opposite of what we now know to be true.
Incredible.
He's ranting. We'd better tranquilize him. I knew it was too good to be true. I parked right near the hospital.
Now here, you smoke this, and be sure you get the smoke deep down into your lungs.
I don't smoke.
It's tobacco. It's one of the healthiest things for your body. Now go ahead. You need all the strength you can get.
You know, I bought Polaroid at 7. It's probably up millions by now.
Well, some badly needed humour there. And it is funny, isn't it? That things that were unhealthy a certain time ago become healthy again. It's like butter. I mean, the whole margarine business came about because butter was meant to be bad for you. Today, butter's good for you again. And that story there. And we do know we have a friend who likes to have a couple of cigarettes for health purposes. So each to their own, and there it was. All right. Now, the hardest story that many of us have had to deal with, certainly in recent times, is the murder of Charlie Kirk in broad daylight. And it has opened up wounds. It has created all sorts of arguments, attacks. Yesterday I was called controlled opposition, so was Craig Kelly. In fact, it was on that interview. Someone bothered to make a comment that he and I were controlled opposition. Now, that is a Bosey slander that comes straight out of Bosey's mouth, Mr. 1%, who's now talking about going to jail for not paying a fine for not voting in the election where he ran. So the record keeping is not very good. You'd appeal it, Ricardo. You wouldn't make yourself into a martyr. But the people that want to call me controlled opposition and Craig Kelly, what you really need to do is stand up and run for public office and bother to put your photograph on your posts and on your profile and your real name and put yourself out there and just see what it's like. But Craig Kelly, and I've asked him directly, publicly and privately to his face whether he's a Freemason, and people call me a Freemason, for goodness sake. A Freemason. Are you serious? What a ridiculous, stupid slander. Craig laughed it off and he said, because then there was the fellow from the UAP that held his campaign meeting in a Freemason building and, of course, was slandered for it, and he didn't realise what he had done. He just hired the room. Well, we never saw that guy again. He was too embarrassed to bother doing it. But that guy used to run as a candidate every election for Clive and just did it as a community service just to stick it up the people. So the misinterpretation is probably why we get things right and get things wrong, because we can jackpot and land it right or get it wrong. But sometimes you just got to hold back. But at the same time, Craig Kelly, when in Parliament, did more to advance the cause and more to help us out and to make connections in the United States with people like Senator Ron Johnson, Dr. Peter McCullough, etc., and brought all that together when Clive brought them out to Australia. That was Craig who made those introductions. And, of course, did more and has been proven right over and over and over again, and he's defended. Now, I asked him specifically about the so-called 28 names, which I believed was a real thing too, and in many cases still do and have massive suspicions. But I've also learnt in the world of trying to make that happen, to raise awareness, to get change and talk to people about the 90-year suppression order and all that stuff. Craig explained to me that even if we get that out, he already knew what the defence or the retaliation would be to continue to suppress it. And it was this, that they were simply going to say that Senator Bill Heffernan had early onset dementia and didn't know what he was talking about. That was the defence. Now, you can throw bananas at the screen and you can say what a load of BS, whatever. But that's the reality of what we are and were dealing with. So what do? Do you bang your head against the wall and scream at the clouds? A great quote from Gerard Rennick. Or do you work on another way to make inroads? Now, critics of John Howard, like we said, certainly when John Howard made those comments about the 90-year suppression, etc., that we've all heard about, but equally he came out and called himself a climate agnostic earlier in the week. And what did that do? It got the Liberal Party to change direction And it got Craig Kelly to realise that there was a crack in the armour and an opening for Andrew Hastie to leave that party. And that could still be happening behind the scenes. And Craig identified 6 people he could go with. And the Liberal Party can't afford to lose 6 people, which could lead to the Menzies moment. So when you least expect it, things happen. We all have to play different roles in what we're doing. I've been involved in the Labor Party. I've been involved with the Hemp Party, the United Australia Party, and Gerard Rennick's party. And I don't know which one is better or worse. They're all trying. And the big ones are generally where they have the most to win and the most to lose and the most corruption. And many have been following me for some time know the reasons why I left the Labor Party. And I called it and I predicted it. But it's not about any of that, and it's not about me. It's simply about the realities. So, going back to Charlie Kirk, the narrative official is that Tyler Robinson, no relation to Tommy Robinson, pulled a trigger from 180 metres, 200 yards, and took out Charlie. Now, there's a fellow on YouTube called Paramount Tactical. I'm not going to play the clips in today's show, but check him out on YouTube, Paramount Tactical. I watched 3 or 4 of them this morning for about an hour, and they're very interesting because he talks about the exit wounds and gives examples of smaller caliber bullets and the damage that they would have done. He also suggests that Charlie was wearing body armour and shows us what he thought, which style of body armour Charlie was wearing. And potentially he was hit and there was a ricochet up, which you can have a look at that for yourself. He talks about whether it was from behind, and he identifies the man I'm going to show you in these next 2 short clips, but stops short, which I also thought was interesting, but I don't think it rules it in or rules it out, but he effectively debunks it. But he is getting millions of views, and he is qualified, and he's explaining, and he's also telling what is and what isn't. Now, equally this week on my other episode of the 51st State, I had Elijah Schaefer, who is certainly not in Israel's pocket. He's fighting Israel for that narrative. So thanks for those calling me controlled opposition. Would I have Elijah Schaefer on the show? And if you know Jamie McIntyre, well, you know his position. I want the stories to get out there, but I can't add to where I can't add, and I will put in where I can if I can extend or expand the conversation. That's my role. I don't have 1 million followers, but I have a duty to do what I'm doing if I can somehow advance the cause for Australia and for those in my life, including myself, because we all deserve to have something more for the efforts that we put in, you would think, or at least live lives of joy and growth. So let's play now this very controversial 2 clips. Have a look for yourself. We'll come back, have a quick chat.
How many mass shooters there have been in America over the last 10 years? Counting or not counting gang violence? Great. How many mass shooters there have been in America over the last 10 years? Counting or not counting gang violence? Great.
Did you see that? There's a man standing there, something under his armpit. You see a flash and then he moves back right at the right moment. So what Paramount Tactical does is that he's looking at trajectories and entry wounds and exit wounds. So please go have a look at it. That was very compelling, and yet Paramount Tactical debunks it, doesn't think it's real. Let's take another shot. Oh, beg your pardon. Let's take another look.
The threats of violence, receive the threats of violence,
It's astonishing. Now, Jackson Hinkle shared another very long post today putting together all of the circumstantial evidence pointing the finger at Israel. And many people would be aware of that. And people, of course, bring their own circumstantial evidence, which means that if you are only presenting that, that means you're bringing a bias, because that's not evidence that can be used in a court of law to win, although circumstantial evidence sometimes wins court cases, even though it's not meant to. But if you're only relying on it, then you generally are going to be told that you can't win the case won't be brought forward. And if you're depending on it, then that is a bias. So you've got to go and expand your knowledge and your thinking. So, next up, what makes that interesting was that General Michael Flynn commented on that particular post that had 3.7 million views, and he suggested that that part should be involved in an investigation. And he then included names like Pam Bondi to look at it and see what's happening. And so then we arrive as we get to the end of the show, and Donald Trump is in the UK meeting the King, and there are big posters put out of Trump and Jeffrey Epstein, but none of King Charles and Jimmy Savile. I find that interesting as much as it is hypocritical. Don't you? We're either all in or we're not in. Now, for those of us that are Trump followers are watching and realizing that he brought all this stuff up, the Hinkle tweet suggests that Trump is scared of Israel, and yet Netanyahu comes to the White House, Trump bombs Iran where necessary, and that whole nuclear thing goes away. Who's really in charge? Saving Israel for last? Who's in charge? It's certainly above my pay grade, all of our pay grades really. If Donald Trump is compromised today and Charlie Kirk was taken out because of it, does that mean that we are headed down tyrannical highway and that's it? By a nation a third of the size of Tasmania with 6 million people? Or do you think that perhaps there might well be a rearguard action, and this is all about the full exposure? 8 years on, 9 years on, nearly 10 years on now to finally bring it to a head. Like Hulk Hogan in the wrestling, he always looked like he was going to lose before he wins. Trump does the exact same thing. So whilst I have a little bit of a butterfly or two, I still remain confident that we are not in this to go backwards, but to go forwards, the great big fight. And if Labor and their relationship with China is enough to expose the absolute hypocrisy of climate change behaviour, then so be it. But they are kidding themselves. If they think that for every dollar we put in, $32 works against us in China, and to quote JFK, we all breathe the same air. On that note, have a great weekend, and remember that regardless of the blackpilling and the bad news, you only get one life, and it's there to be lived. The best way forward for all of us is to live it. Forget the hate, forget the rest. Everyone really wants the same thing. A roof over their head, enough money so that they can live tomorrow, enough that when they can't work that they can still survive, and to raise their kids to be happy with the same opportunities. It's not hard. And that's it. See you all next week. This news format on Channel 51 is adjusting due to the workload that goes into it. So we'll continue to get content out for you every day during the week, possibly on weekends, but there might not necessarily be a daily bulletin when I'm also doing the interviews, if that makes sense, so that we can maximize and get stuff out to you every single day of value that adds to the conversation. There's little point in just duplicating for the sake of it. If you're watching on Cafe Locked Out through the various different pages, thank you. Please like, share, etc. Come to channel51.com.au. You can subscribe for free and get access to pretty much all of the content. And if you choose to sponsor the show, you can pay $75 for an annual subscription, and you'll get a second one to qcitizen.net as well, which gives you access to all the archived interviews such as Ian Plimer, etc., that you caught a glimpse of in today's show. Thank you. See you all on